Have you ever made the wrong choice? Have you ever followed the wrong crowd or listened to the wrong person? I have, and it nearly destroyed me. My name is Malchus, and I was the servant of the high priest of Israel, Caiaphas. Serving him, it was what my life was all about. I never thought that I would be in the history books, but I am. I'm a footnote in history. But it's okay because I'm a footnote in the greatest story, in the greatest book that has ever been written. The funny thing is, I spent most of my life surrounded by rich and powerful men that had history books written about them. But most, if not all of them, have been lost to time. But yet 2,000 years later, people still know my name. Malcus, the servant. Yes, I was a servant, but I was a servant of the high priest. And it was a special honor. It was a privilege to serve any of the members of the Sanhedrin Council. It was considered to be an honor because these were the 70 most powerful men in all of Israel. But I didn't just serve one of the council members. I served the leader of the Sanhedrin Council, the high priest, Caiaphas himself. I don't know too much about your country or your customs, but I believe it would be somewhat like serving the president as his presidential aide there in Washington, D.C. It was a high honor for me. I'm not sure exactly how it happened because I was born to unremarkable circumstances. My parents were two unremarkable people from the tribe of Levi. And I know some of you might think that being a Levite must have been special. And sure, it was. If you were a member of the priestly line, or if you belonged to a family that was one of the temple caretakers. But not all of us Levites were born to families like that. Some of us were born to be servants, to serve the other rich and powerful Levite families. And so I knew from an early age what my destiny was, that I was destined to serve another family of the Levite tribe, just like my father had done before me, and his father had done before him, and his father before him. And so, knowing that I came from unremarkable family, that I was going to have an unremarkable job, I was certain that I was going to lead an unremarkable life. But boy, was I wrong. See, at around 14 years old, like I said, I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but somehow I caught the attention of Caiaphas, and he made me his servant. I had known about Caiaphas before. He was a very obviously impressive person. But as I began to work for him, I saw just how amazing this man was. He was head and shoulders above all of the other priests. Literally, he was tall. And not just tall, he was muscular. He had this imposing physical presence. He was at the peak. He was in his prime. And not just that, he was wise. He was the smartest, the most wise man that I had ever met. He had memorized all of the law and the prophets. He could recite the Torah backwards and forwards. Literally, he could say the Torah backwards and forwards. He knew more about the Scriptures than I could ever hope to even imagine, to dream that I could know. And not only was he powerful physically, was he wise spiritually, he was rich. He was rich, not just little rich, just very. He was one of the most richest people that I had ever met. And this combination of the high priest being wise and being strong and being rich, it just gave him this aura of magnificence. I knew I was beyond lucky to serve him. And so, I worked hard. I worked really hard to do whatever I could to ease that burden of leadership. Caiaphas had so much going on. He had to not only set the direction, the spiritual direction of the entire nation of Israel, he had to try to maintain a peace between the warring factions of the Jewish leaders. And at the same time, he tried to keep the Romans out of our hair. It would have drove a lesser man insane. And so, as I said, I worked hard for this man. I began my service doing basic clerical tasks, but as the years passed, and as Caiaphas saw how hard I was working for him, he began to depend on me more and more. And I think it was around my 6th year of service to Caiaphas that, for all intents and purposes, I became his right-hand man. He would use me to do these important tasks. He would have me do real important work, things that mattered, things that would help determine the destiny of Israel. There were these people that would pop up every now and then, these Israelites that would use these wild claims, make these crazy assertions that they were the Messiah. And Caiaphas couldn't stand these people because it was always the same. These fake messiahs would show up, and they would get a crowd to follow them. And then they would always attack some of the Romans. Well, the Romans wouldn't stand for that, and so they would always destroy these rebels and then go on to make life miserable for the rest of us Jews. Every time one of these fake messiahs popped up, every time one of these rebels tried to lead a rebellion, it always ended up hurting everyone else. We would lose out on luxury resources. We would get taxed more. We would have less access to food. Life just became more and more miserable. And so Caiaphas would have me go investigate these potential rebel leaders. He would have me dig up what you call dirt on them so that he could use it to nip it in the bud, to stop them before they became really dangerous. One morning, Caiaphas came to me and he asked me to investigate this one man named Jesus of Nazareth. I had never heard of this man before, but he, as I found out, had begun his ministry just a short time before by being baptized in the Jordan River by John. And as I heard that he had this connection to John the Baptizer, I immediately had this feeling of unease in my stomach because I knew that John the Baptist had caused a lot of trouble for Caiaphas. As he taught and as he preached there by the Jordan, John had actually managed to convince several Pharisees and a few other members of the Sanhedrin that the Messiah was actually coming soon. And because they were convicted of this, Caiaphas started to lose his control over them. So when I heard that Jesus had this connection to John the Baptist, I was filled with a sense of urgency to stop Jesus, to really squash him as soon as I could. It didn't take long, though, for me to have to ask other people about him, because before I knew it, his name seemed to be on everyone's lips. People just walking down the street were talking about Jesus, and I actually had people just come up to me, people that I didn't know, people that I had never seen before, coming up to me, telling me about Jesus, about his teachings, about his powerful miracles. And it just seemed that every story was more incredible than the one before it. He was teaching these things like we needed to focus more on forgiveness and mercy and not on revenge. He was saying that we shouldn't be so caught up with money and possessions. He was saying that we needed to love our enemies, even the Romans. How could you expect someone to do that? I mean, really, how could someone love their enemies? How could anyone love a Roman? That was crazy. That this guy was obviously insane. I was sure that people were only listening to him because of his, quote, miracles. People were saying that he was healing the lepers, that he was giving the sight back to the blind people, that he'd even helped a paralyzed man get up and walk again, or a couple of paralyzed men get up and walk. My people were so gullible. Couldn't they just see how obvious it was that, I mean, it was no big deal that some guy came along and washed some painted on spots off of a few people, or that he had paid someone to pretend that they were blind to magically cure them, or that he had hired an actor to play the role of a paralyzed man. My people, weren't they tired of being lied to? I knew that if I could see Jesus in action, I could discredit this fraud once and for all. And so when I heard that he was going towards the town of Gennesaret, I made my way there too, to see Jesus in person. When I got there, I saw that Jesus had actually just arrived a few minutes before me, because there was this man, if you could call him that. He was obviously possessed by demons. And I could hear from a ways off just this screeching and this commotion. As I got closer to where Jesus and this man and the disciples were all at, I heard this possessed man say to Jesus, "If you're going to cast us out, cast us into those pigs." Jesus said, "Go." And all of a sudden, that man slumped down. And the herd of swine that were nearby, they just started to go crazy. And then they broke free from their pen, and kind of as one, they just all ran off this cliff and went into the ocean. And they all drowned there in the sea. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. This was obviously not a faked miracle. Yeah, he could have paid someone to pretend that they had been possessed by a demon, but there is no way that Jesus could have trained these pigs to do what I had just seen them do. For the first time, I began to think that Jesus really did have some supernatural power. So I went back to Caiaphas, and I reported the things that I had seen. And then I asked him if he thought that maybe, just maybe, if there was just a little small chance that possibly Jesus could be the Messiah. In all the years that I'd worked for Caiaphas, I had never made him angry, never made him upset, and so I was shocked to see his face just turned instantly red, and he bellowed at me, "Of course not, you fool! Didn't you see, he just cast out a demon, right? That doesn't mean he's the Messiah. That just shows that he's in control of a demon. He's not the Messiah. What he is the prince of demons. And if you value your life, you will never, ever even hint that Jesus is the Messiah again." Well, Caiaphas, he removed me from my responsibilities temporarily until I could get my thoughts straightened out. And so as I was there in the temple grounds, stuck there on the grounds, I began to think about what I had seen. And I realized that Caiaphas had a point. I mean, who was I to be questioning him? Caiaphas was the spiritual leader of Israel. If anyone could be able to tell the difference between good and evil, it should be him. And so I just waited until Caiaphas came to me again. He came finally with another assignment after he figured I had learned my lesson. He came to me and he told me that he needed me to go back and continue to investigate Jesus because the traps that they had usually set, the traps that he knew usually worked on these false messiahs, on these fake messiahs, somehow they weren't working on Jesus. Somehow Jesus was able to wiggle his way out, to escape the plots and the traps that Caiaphas had set for him. And so he needed me to find some solid evidence that he could use to destroy Jesus once and for all. And so I went out. I was excited to get out, to get going again, and to do something else that was important. Little did I know what I was about to witness. I heard that one of Jesus' closest friends, Lazarus, had died. And so I went to Bethany, knowing that I could get some dirt on him there. I'm sure one of his sisters, either Mary or Martha, maybe both of them, would be so upset at Jesus for not healing their brother, that they would spill the beans and tell me exactly what I needed to know about this imposter Messiah. Well, I got to Bethany about 4 days after Lazarus had died. And as I was going up to Martha to talk to her about her anger towards Jesus, lo and behold, who should appear? Jesus. And so all of this commotion came, and Jesus, I can't believe the nerve on this guy, for him to not only show up 4 days late to his best friend's bedside. When he got there, he called everyone over to Lazarus' tomb. And he didn't stop there. He had them roll away the stone. It was so bizarre. And it was quite unpleasant, too. The odor was testifying that Lazarus had indeed been dead for quite some time. Then Jesus shouts with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" I couldn't believe that anyone that was around there could actually believe that Jesus was going to have Lazarus come back to life. I mean, that was just preposterous. Yeah, okay, Jesus had raised a few people from the dead before, but they had only been dead a few short hours. It was short enough, definitely, that they could have been faking it, that they were faking it. But Lazarus, he had been in there for 4 days. There was no way that he was pretending that he was dead. And so there was no way that he was going to come back to life. And yet, Lazarus, he answered Jesus' call. Lazarus came out of the tomb. He was wrapped in his burial clothes, and so it was a struggle for him, and Mary and Martha ran over to him and cut him free. And as they removed those clothes, everyone could see that it actually was Lazarus. And he had been restored. He was fully healthy again. And to be honest with you, it was terrifying. Because if this prince of demons could actually raise someone from the dead, well, you can only imagine how much that would inspire any Jewish rebels to fight, to be brave, to do stupid things, to do whatever they wanted to attack and to kill the Romans, because they would be convinced that their leader could just raise them back up after they died on the battlefield. And Rome wasn't going to stand for that. That would mean they would send the full force of their army to our country. They would slaughter us all. They would destroy the temple. They would wipe our country off the map. So Jesus had to be stopped. I couldn't let this happen. Thankfully, because I was kind of out of ideas, one of his disciples, one of his very own disciples, Judas Iscariot, decided to betray him. I don't know why he did what he did, but it didn't matter to me. All that mattered was that was exactly what we needed. See, Caiaphas couldn't trouble Jesus. He couldn't arrest Jesus in the middle of the day in the crowd in Jerusalem, because Jesus was so popular that the people would have rioted. And especially now that there were Jews streaming into the country from all over the world to celebrate this upcoming Passover feast, this festival, that would mean there would be even more Jews than ever to riot and to protect Jesus and to do whatever he wanted them to do. So we couldn't lay a hold of him in public. We needed to get to him privately at night. But we didn't know where he went at night. We didn't know what he did. He just came onto our turf during the day when he was safe. But Judas knew where he went. Judas promised to take us to him, to arrest him when he was at his most vulnerable. And so the plan was set. And Judas received his fee of 30 pieces of silver, and he led a crowd of us, of Roman soldiers, of other Jewish temple officials and other loyal Jews to arrest Jesus. He led us to this relatively small garden called Gethsemane, outside of the city limits, right outside the gate of the Essenes. And there we saw him in the flickering light of the torches. But just to be sure that we arrested the right man, Judas went over to him and he kissed him for all of us to see. As the soldiers made their way towards Jesus, Jesus asked, Who are you looking for?" All of us in the crowd shouted, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he replied, "I am." I know if you've read the story in your Bible, it probably quotes Jesus as saying, "I am he." But that's not what Jesus said. Jesus only said two words, "I am." And there were no two more important words to us Jews than those two words. See, when our greatest leader, Moses, was talking to God at the burning bush, Moses asked God what his name was, and God said two words, "I am." And now here, Jesus, this prince of demons, this false Messiah, was using the same name of God to refer to himself. Talk about blasphemy. I couldn't let this guy insult Jesus, insult God like he was doing. He had to be stopped. But before I could do anything about it, before I could get closer to Jesus, before even the Roman soldiers could take another step, this bright, blinding light exploded all around us. It was, I had never seen, it was like lightning. It was disorienting. I just stumbled and I fell backwards. When I started to come back to my senses, I had this vague thought. I couldn't really nail it down. My mind still wasn't, I guess, working completely, but I thought that of this connection between the I am of the burning bush that Moses saw to the I am of the burning light that I had seen. And I felt like I was on holy ground, like Moses had been 1,400 years before. But then Caiaphas' words and his threats came back into my mind, and so I shook off those feelings, and I stood up and I saw that the Roman soldiers had tied Jesus' hands, that he was bound, and I wasn't going to let anything to chance, though. So I walked over to inspect the ropes, to make sure they had tied the knots properly. And as I was deep in my inspection, I heard this thunderous yell. And I looked up just in time to see a sword blade glowing in the torchlight. And it was coming right towards my head. And so I did the best I could to get out of the way, to dodge. But the searing pain that I felt on the side of my head told me that I hadn't been quick enough. I wasn't just in pain. There was also this cymbal ringing, this gong that was ringing. And I didn't know what was going on. I reached up my hand to try to make it stop, to try to make the pain stop or the ringing stop. And as I put my hand to my head, I felt that my ear was gone. There was nothing left. My ear had been there, but now it was just blood. I was shocked. I looked up to see who had done this, and I saw standing there Peter, one of Jesus' loudest, his most impetuous disciple, and he was holding the sword that was bloodied. I was in so much shock. I don't know what I would have done if if Peter had tried to finish me off right there. But Jesus stopped him from swinging that blade again. Why would he do that? If I had been Jesus, if I was the prince of demons, I would have told Peter to kill anyone that was standing before me, threatening me. But not Jesus. He didn't do that. He told Peter to put his sword away. In my pain and in my confusion, I knelt down to try to find my ear. I don't know why, what good that would have done, but I was looking for it, and I saw that Jesus was kneeling down right next to me. And he was reaching out for my ear. I don't know how that had happened. He was bound. I had just been inspecting the ropes and the knots, and yet there he was. His hands were free, and he found my ear before I had, and he picked it up. I didn't know what he was going to do with it for a second, and then he put it back. He touched the right side of my head again. And just like that, the pain was gone. The ringing had stopped. I don't know what was going on. How? And I put my hand back up to my ear to feel it, and it was there. And I gave a little tug, gently, of course, but I tugged on it, and it didn't come off. Jesus had healed my ear. Why? Why would he do that? I didn't understand. And I thought I was in shock before, but I couldn't move then. And so I watched as the mob and the soldiers led Jesus away to face trial. I just sat there in the garden trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. This was not a fake miracle. I was living proof that this was not a fake miracle. I did not pretend to have my ear chopped off. Jesus had really fixed me. So that must have meant that he used his demonic power to help me. But why would a demon help me? Why would a demon protect me? Why would a demon heal me? I knew I wasn't as smart as Caiaphas, but there was no way that this was the work of a demon. That meant that the only other option was that Jesus was from God. That Jesus really was the true Messiah. And that realization, it tore my world apart. Because this should have been amazing, wonderful, happy news that our long-awaited Messiah had come. But yet when I realized what had happened, I just got this pit in my stomach because I knew what was going to happen to Jesus. I didn't have to go to the courtroom to know that Jesus was going to be found guilty. I'd overheard Caiaphas make those arrangements 3 days before. I didn't have to wait for the Romans to sentence Jesus because I knew that the Sanhedrin was not going to stop short of anything but death. Our Messiah had come, but our spiritual leaders were going to kill him. Finally, I I summoned all the strength that I could. And I stood up and I began to walk back towards my room there near the temple. As I made my way, I was snapped back to reality when I saw a body hanging from a tree. My first thought was that the mob had just done away with the law, done away with protocol, and had just lynched Jesus themselves directly. But I figured, well, if that had been the case, then there would be a crowd around him. But there was no crowd around this body. There was nobody around this corpse. As I got closer, I saw why. It was the body of that traitor, Judas. And I looked at him hanging there. And I felt, I felt a morbid connection to him. Because he must have realized, just like I did, that we were both responsible for the death of Jesus. I could see why he had done what he had did. And I actually thought about joining him on that tree. Honestly, if I had had some rope available, I probably would have. I definitely would have. But I had no rope. And I really had no energy. I was exhausted. And so I went back to my room and I locked myself in, not knowing if I would ever leave again. Some time passed. I don't know. I was in a fog, really. Might have been 2 days, 3 days. But then a messenger came from Caiaphas, summoning me to him. He told me that Caiaphas needed me urgently because someone had stolen Jesus' body and that there was this rumor going around that Jesus had actually come back to life. I dismissed the messenger and I just was stunned. Could it be? Could that really have happened? No, there's no way. That's impossible. That doesn't make any sense. Jesus couldn't have done that. But I realized that if I had learned anything in my investigation of Jesus, is that what I thought he could do was in no limitation of what Jesus could actually do. My thoughts did not limit him in the least. And so I quickly got dressed and I left my room, not to report to Caiaphas, but to look for Jesus. And I began to search and to search. I questioned so many people, but there was very few that had even heard of this resurrection rumor. And nobody knew where Jesus or his disciples even might have been. And so I spent days going to the various places that I knew Jesus liked to have spent time in during his ministry, during his life. But I had no luck. I needed to see him again. I needed to ask for forgiveness. I just needed to see Jesus. But right as I was about to give up, I had the thought of going back to the place where I had last seen him alive. And so I went back to the garden. I went back to Gethsemane. But Jesus wasn't there. But as I stood there and I looked at these olive trees, something in me snapped. And all of the emotion, all of the experiences of the past few days, of the past few years just broke through. And I began to weep. there, for the first time, as I was in the Garden of Gethsemane, I began to pour out my heart to God. I don't know when the last time I did that was. It was probably before I had started my service to Caiaphas. And as I was there just sobbing and talking to God and begging Him for forgiveness, begging Him to forgive me for all of the things that I had done in Caiaphas' service, to forgive me for all of the things that I had done to Jesus Himself, something changed. I felt my heart like someone had lifted this burden off of it, this 100-pound weight. And for the first time I could remember, I felt my heart beating again. And it was amazing. But as I turned to leave the garden, something even more amazing happened. Jesus showed up. Jesus was there. It had happened. It wasn't just a rumor. It wasn't just someone hadn't stolen his body. He was really there. He was right there in front of me. And I fell immediately on my knees. And I worshiped my Messiah. Jesus looked down at me and He touched me right where He had healed me, my ear. And He assured me that I was forgiven. Jesus, He touched me and He healed my ear physically. But more than that, somehow Jesus had reached into the core of who I was. He had touched my heart and He had healed me spiritually. Do you know what my name, Malchus, means? It means my King. And as I kneeled there before Jesus, my name had never been more so appropriate. Because Jesus, He was my King. Jesus was my Messiah. Jesus was my Savior. So what is Jesus to you? Who do you say that Jesus is? Is He just another false, fake, wannabe Messiah that this world has seen so many of already? I'm here to tell you that there was nothing fake about Him. Is He to you a fairy tale that only fools or little children believe in? I'm here to tell you that He is more than a story. He was real and He is real and He is my Messiah. To you, is He just another good moral teacher? To me, He was so much more. To me, He is the Savior of the world. So I ask you, who is Jesus to you? Please don't make the wrong choice and let it destroy you. Please, I pray, I hope that to you, Jesus is your King, that He is your Messiah, and that He is your Savior.